Welcome to Big Closet Small Planet, made possible by the C&A Foundation, the H&M Foundation, the Rylander Foundation, and Tencel. Big Closet Small Planet is produced in collaboration with Ecotextile News and Planet Textiles. I'm Mike Schrager. In June 2016, a Guardian journalist named Leah Messinger wrote an article with this headline: How Your Clothes Are Poisoning Our Oceans and Food Supply. The article highlighted new research showing that alarming numbers of tiny fibers from synthetic fabrics were making their way from our washing machines into aquatic animals. More specifically, researchers from the University of California at Santa Barbara found that, on average, a synthetic fleece jacket released 1.7 grams of microfibers each wash. It also found that older jackets shed almost twice as many fibers as new jackets. And then these microfibers then traveled to our local wastewater treatment plant, where up to 40% of them enter the rivers, lakes, and oceans. The study was funded by the outdoor clothing manufacturer Patagonia. Since then, an increasing attention has been focused on this issue of microfibers and microplastics. But a lot has happened since 2016. I have here with me Sophie Mather. I said I'm looking at her, and you know all that I'm terrible at names, and I got it right, she's smiling, to help shed some light on the developments of this topic since 2016. Sophie, before you introduce yourself and your background, I want to ask a few questions of you. Are you ready for that? A few questions. All I want you to do, all you get to do is answer true, false, or not sure. Okay? Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so.
She's terrified, everyone. Totally terrified. Okay, the first one, it should be an easy one. My body consists of more than 25% microplastics.
False.
False. We are 100% sure that microplastics, microfibers are harmful to the environment.
We're sure.
We are 100% sure that microplastics, microfibers are harmful to human health.
We assume we're not 100% sure.
So that would be not sure. The apparel and textile industry is responsible for a significant number of microfibers now found in waterways and oceans.
True.
We have solutions today to fix the problem.
Nearly there.
Okay, that wasn't one of the answers allowed. I said the scientist in you doesn't want to give the black and white answer. Okay, so who are you, Sophie? Why are you here today? Why are you talking about this?
Why am I talking about it? I'm a self-confessed textile geek, really. I have a background in textile design and then textile technology, but I've spent the last 20 odd years working in the textile industry, predominantly in textile innovation and textile innovation around sustainability. So yeah, textiles through and through, really.
And so how did you become interested in this particular topic?
I think there was a frustration when I first started listening to what was happening from a research level. There was a lot of talk around, fleece fabrics and polyester fabrics, and, how we could put things in the washing machine to stop them affecting the environment. And I just thought, well, if we get back to the textile science and understand how we put these fabrics together, we can really start to engineer things differently. But the interest from the industry at the time wasn't there. There was a lot of fear, there was a lot of there was denial about what was actually happening. So I really started to get involved to dig deeper and really try and find the answers for myself. And it's been quite a fascinating journey since then, really.
So why do you think the microplastic sort of topic has got more attention during the last few years?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because when I first started, I did a piece of crowdfunding to actually raise awareness and raise funding to do the work. And at the time, it was really difficult to get that attention because people were really interested in big plastic things that they could see, plastic bags in the ocean, plastic bottles. And it wasn't really until Blue Planet 2 came out.
Blue Planet 2, which is a
BBC documentary programme. And people started to talk more and more about it, and I think then there was more openness to understand that it could actually be something invisible, such as a tiny microfiber that you can't really see, by the human eye, that was actually just as harmful as the big plastic bags and plastic bottles that we see floating in the ocean.
Right. My own experience is that both of those issues have increased in awareness dramatically, right? Just the pictures that you see on social media about the plastics in the ocean and the cleanup attempts have really transformed people's understanding of what we're doing to the oceans. But I'm not so sure from my own experience that people who are not working with sustainability in the textile industry are aware of microplastics or microfibers.
I think there's less. I think the cosmetics industry was quite helpful for us here because they had the ban on microbeads before us, and that's something that people could really relate to. They could understand it from the products in their bathroom, their cosmetics, etc. So that was a really good starting point for us to go in and say, actually, if you think about the cosmetics industry, what we're trying to do is the same here in the clothing industry. And that was my angle into this. And we had a lot of stats, we had policy, we had things behind it that we could really take as a starting point. And also, my feeling was that, the larger items you can collect more easily. And it wasn't until I was walking along the beach one day and I was picking up litter and, the plastic bits were getting smaller and smaller until they were no different to the size of a grain of sand. And at that point I realised that if we think about it in the textile industry, those microfibers that are coming out are so small that we can't pick them out from the sea. We can't go down and do a beach clean and pull them out.
So can you then help us understand more specifically what this is? So what are microfibers? How do you define them?
Microfibers, this is a really quite difficult one to explain because I think what happened is when we talk about the term microfibers in this sense, we're talking about small pieces of microplastics that are coming out of garments. And it's a title that's been given to something by non-textile people. In the textile industry, we use the term microfibers to define a synthetic fibre that's less than 1 denier or decitex and having a diameter of less than 10 micrometers. So that's a very specific textile technology term. When we talk to the suppliers, that is what they understand. So then when we come in and we talk about this problem, which is microfibers coming out of textile clothing, there's a lot of confusion. And I think at the moment we're at that stage where, it's almost a little bit too late to redefine the title of what we're trying to understand here. But in a way, we need to think about that title because it's very misleading.
So are we using it wrong? So in textiles, when you speak about microfibers, that's a very specific a measurement. Are we talking about something broader than that when we're talking about the problem?
Yes, because if you think of microplastics, you've got your microplastics. From microplastics you can get something even finer, which is a microfiber, and then ultimately you can get something even smaller than that, which is a microfragment. So you've basically got 3 tiers of understanding or 3 tiers of the challenge. A fragment, we're getting so tiny there. When we talk about how we're actually stopping this from getting into the environment, some of the kind of capture methods are using filters. Those filters are going to have to get smaller and smaller, so the complexities in doing that becomes more and more difficult. And also, the thought that some filters are then going to be counterintuitive to some of the processes that they're attached to.
So you said when I asked you true or false or not sure, which you didn't follow my instructions, by the way, which no one ever does. You said that we're 100% sure, I believe you answered, that microfibers, or what we're now referring to more broadly as fragments or such, are harmful to the environment. Tell us more. What is the impact? What is the problem?
I'm not a marine biologist, and I'm not going to try and pretend that I understand their world. But a lot of the research that we took our starting point from was from the marine biology world. And I think where a lot of the concerns were the impact to marine habitats, to fish, and to what was happening in the marine environment. So we've seen some shocking pictures of what's actually happening there, whether it's the actual microfiber itself that's found in the belly of these marine animals, or whether it's the chemicals that have come as the microfiber as a carrier, bringing those chemicals in, that are then found in other parts of that fish or whatever. So we've seen a lot of academic research that's kind of demonstrating the impact at the marine level. But although it started with the conversation at the marine level, we know that microfibers are in the air. There's the air pollution, and that's not just one fiber type. We're finding that there's a lot of fibers coming out from all different compositions, natural fibers and synthetic fibers.
Okay, so not only do we have synthetic fibers creating microfibers or fragments, other lengths that are invisible to the human eye, but natural fibers, those non-synthetics, the cottons, the viscose, they also shed fibers.
Everything sheds.
Everything sheds.
And the look on your face is, you look horrified.
I'm horrified. I'm shedding right now.
Yes,
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think every fibre has an ability to shed in a different way. And perhaps I should actually move from the terminology of saying every fibre has the ability, because it's not just about the fibre at the end of the day. It's about the fibre together with how that has gone into a fabric through its yarn construction, how it's developed into what we wear as consumers. But everything has the ability. I think my world is about understanding the difference between one thing and another thing, and how when we're putting our materials together we can put an informed decision into making the best fabrics we possibly can.
So I can imagine, even though we don't have the marine scientists with us today, that the synthetic plastic fragments, fibers, they seem to have a clear harm to the environment, to the aquatic marine life. But the natural fibers that also do this shedding, do we have the same expectations that they're equally as problematic?
I think what's the conversation at the moment is there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions that, well, maybe not even knee-jerk reactions, quite well-informed reactions that natural fibres are naturally biodegradable, so therefore they're not contributing to this issue. But some of the research has actually shown that we are finding huge volumes of natural, supposedly biodegradable materials on the marine floor, which we wouldn't expect if we were just working with that theory that natural fibres biodegrade and synthetics don't. So there's a lot of science out there that we get excited when a new research paper comes out, and then we almost kind of like sigh at the end of it going, oh no, there's more questions yet to be asked, because it's not always that clear. You try and piece this work together, and we're still in that learning phase. We've come a long way in the last couple of years, but we are still learning every day, and trying to define exactly what everything means is still pretty complex.
So this volume of collection of natural fiber fragments could also be a problem. We don't know.
Yeah, well, I think we are seeing potentially a lot more natural fibres being released from fabrics just through the nature of how they're produced and what they are. We're getting a lot more. So it could be that some of them are biodegrading, but there's just much higher volumes that need to be dealt with in some way, and we don't know the answers to that yet. We will continue reading research papers until we get there and doing the research ourselves.
Okay. So what role does the apparel and textile industry play in this? You've of course implied it plays a role because of obviously the materials we use, but how much of a problem are we responsible for?
It's a really good question. I think there's a lot of textile industries that will be contributing to this, and I think what we're trying to do is quantify what is actually responsible from our industry. And I think when I first started working on this, I was working from best informed estimates that I could get my hands on, and at the time they were talking about figures of about 190,000 tonnes globally per year attributed to the clothing industry. But then when you look at where that data is coming from, it's coming from estimated data. It's coming from test methodologies that haven't yet been aligned across the industry. There's no commonality between them. So if you think of where the data is coming from, then obviously the estimates they're putting out for our industry are going to be pretty broad estimates, but it gave us a starting point. And I think what we're trying to do now is drill down, kind of really refine what the test methods are that we're actually creating our data from, and making sure that when we're putting estimates together now, we're actually putting the estimates together from most up-to-date information. I mean, you spoke at the beginning of the interview about 2016 article. I think when I look back to what was happening then and the kind of accuracy of data we were getting out, and I look at the kind of the realm of data that we're getting out today, it's very different, but we've still got a long way to go.
So let me ask you there, have we, if you compare 2016 to now, have we underestimated the amount or overestimated?
I think we overestimated in the beginning. I would feel confident to say that we overestimated. I mean, just as an example, if you think in the UK alone, we're looking at clothing to landfill figures of around about 350,000 tonnes a year. So that's pretty phenomenal. I think that's quite a good baseline for us to kind of start this conversation really on. And I think, we're starting to get some indications from more recent research that if we're looking at UK figures, we could be looking at something between about 3,000 and 12,000 tonnes per year of microfiber release, which is very different from that 190,000, sorry, get my noughts in the right place, that we were talking about, a couple of years ago. But then if you then apply on top of that what wastewater filtering is actually doing, you could actually potentially have the ability to drop that down to between about 140 tonnes to 600 tonnes per annum. So you can see how all of a sudden we're scaling those figures down and down. I still feel it's a concern to us, and we still need to carry on with this work, because until we can move from estimated to accurate data, this is an issue for our industry. And I think that's something we need to be very aware of. Just because we've put out a new estimate doesn't mean to say it's less of an issue, because that is still an estimate.
Right. Although it gives, in a very bleak often discussion, it gives a little hope that it's not as bad as we thought it was.
Yeah, it would be lovely if we can get to a position where we're actually demonstrating that our industry is not contributing as much as we initially thought.
Okay. So we have to get the methodologies to measure correct. We need to get the data right. But as we always know, you never get perfect data, so we need to act as well. Are there any new technologies or solutions that we know of now that can help solve the problem as we are improving our estimations?
Yeah, I think from the early stages, and I think this has also helped my research and my work, is we've seen a number of drop-in technologies that you can put into the washing machine, and you can actually capture...
like the guppy, right?
Yes. Do you know about that?
I know the guppy. Everybody knows the guppy.
So there's a guppy bag and the Cora ball, and there's technologies like that. And I think what they did a really good job of was really raising awareness at the consumer level. So a lot of people felt really responsible for this and had this really quick reaction of what can I do? And by using that, they could see visually for themselves what they were capturing. So I think that worked really well. But I've always said from the beginning, this needs to be a portfolio approach from across a number of different industries. It's not just going to be about us re-engineering a fabric, because that's going to take us a long time. We can do that at the ground roots level. We can do that with our supply bases. We can do it with the brands and retailers. I think immediately the drop-in filters, the washing machine filters, extra work at the wastewater treatment, it's about us all collaborating, understanding what each other's doing, and making sure that we're all doing as much as we can do within our areas of technical expertise.
So let me ask you, you mentioned re-engineering fabrics and such. I do want to talk about that, because when this happened, and a year after it happened, in terms of the awareness and the press around it, you started to hear from companies saying, we have a solution so that fibers don't shed. So I don't know what kind of finishing or such that they were offering. How serious are those kinds of actions?
Yeah, I think that's great, and I love to go around a trade fair, and I love to see what the material suppliers are translating from the research that's out there. Maybe I'm sceptical, but I always look at it through the marketing lens first, and then kind of dig deeper and ask the questions that generally people don't want to be asked. But that's who I am. And it's those difficult questions that really help me to identify whether those are realistic materials that we need to be thinking about, using as solutions. I think until those materials I can see are tested through this kind of aligned and validated test method that we're working on at the moment, I wouldn't want to put any claims out there that they are better than something else.
Okay, so there's no particular solution that you're aware of that is proven scientifically to reduce shedding in comparison to the current approach?
There's nothing that we've taken through our labs, I think is the best way to say.
Okay.
There's nothing that we've taken through our labs that we would be comfortable to promote, but saying that we haven't, generally that's not the remit of our work. I am aware of a number of fabric suppliers and suppliers out there that are working on
Do you think that there at least is a potential or possibility that those solutions exist?
I think when you look at the kind of work behind these solutions, totally. I think there's a lot of really good work going behind them. I think the suppliers that are involved in this are doing a phenomenal job to, one, understand what they can from, quite confusing research out there, translate it through their product development in their mills and things, and come out with solutions. I think that work is great, but I think we'll see that escalating over the next few years. And I think especially now as research, with a more standardised test method, we're going to see research kind of being able to stack upon each other a little bit more.
Obviously this is not their field, but I was thinking of companies like natural fiber welding and such, who are saying that they're working at the chemistry level to make fibers attract each other in a way that, sort of for natural fibers reflects the way synthetics work. And you wonder if in that kind of chemistry that could also reduce shedding.
Yeah, and I think this is what really, you asked me at the beginning, how did I get engaged in all this? And I think it was that really excited me. Is I come from an innovation background. I get involved in difficult things because it makes my world of innovation actually far more difficult, which in the end is actually more exciting, because it enables us to kind of dig deeper and really find solutions where it is actually quite difficult. And I think when I started with the crowdfunding, Don't Feed the Fish, we were looking at the polymer level, we were looking at how different factors reduce the strength of fibres and things like that, and that's where it started to get really interesting. The problem now for me is that level of work, I would need to stop work and jump into a PhD to kind of do some of that. And I think we can give indications to suppliers, and we can have suppliers do a lot of that work on our behalf. But I think at the moment the urgency is with the brands and retailers coming up with product solutions really quite quickly. So we need to target the low-hanging fruit, the ability to act fast and do things now.
Okay, so we wanted to start now, as we did, with an overview, and I think you've done a wonderful job of communicating that. If you were, in terms of rounding it off, if you were to pick one thing to do to accelerate improvement in this area for us to make headway, if you could write a blank check, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you choose? What would one thing be to focus on?
One thing, if you're asking me personally, rather than me representing the whole industry, I would say money into research. Research, not to necessarily just understand the issue, but I think money to go into, as we said before, re-engineering things. That's really where I personally would put my money.
And if you were to speak on behalf of the industry, because I'm wondering what the difference would be here.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a tricky question, but it's proving to be a little bit difficult. On the side of the industry, I think the industry, I wouldn't say just want to, but there is an urgency in the industry to be able to test materials and understand in individual brands and retailers' material portfolios how things are being tested. And if they were to write a blank check, they would put it there so that tomorrow they could take their material portfolios, get the results, and be able to line them up, good, better and best.
Right, so they're interested in their own impacts, and obviously you, thinking on behalf of the public benefit, or thinking more broadly.
I'm thinking the longer term.
Yeah,
my life is generally 5 to 8 years ahead of a lot of other people.
Well, 5 to 8?
Well, I don't know. It's innovation. You have to think ahead of what's happening. I think my fear of brands and retailers just testing material portfolios is that's a very immediate. But what happens if they test their material portfolios and 50% of them look pretty awful? Right. They need to make sure that, people at the kind of innovation and the research level are starting to understand it enough that we've got new solutions to come through. So when their materials fail, we can come up and say, actually, have you thought about this new yarn or this new manufacturing process or whatever? And I think that is why I'm in this work. It's not to create a good, better and best situation of a range of fabrics. It's about making sure that when anything fails, I am ready, or the industry is ready, should I say. I'm not going to do it on my own, to come in there and give some solutions, because at the end of the day, I just want to see difference. Right. I really want to see product difference.
So that's a wonderful, I think, overview for all of you out there. So for those of you who feel that was sufficient to get a handle on this issue, you're welcome to move on, to spend your time elsewhere. But we also know that there are those of you who are listening who want to get into what we call the weeds of the discussion. And so we're going to continue to chat for a few minutes ahead to discuss some of the more challenging questions in this. So please continue listening if that's interesting to you. So, Sophie, I'm thinking about some weedy kind of questions. Maybe you can remind us, what is it we don't know?
We ultimately don't know the quantification coming, we don't know the amounts that are coming from the textile industry. I spoke before about estimations, and I think until we have a very accurate handle on the amount that's coming from the textile industry, I suppose, there is some resistance to making the investment in certain areas. And I think that is the ultimate thing that's perhaps holding things back. And I think we're getting very close to an aligned and validated test method, but I think up until this point we didn't know things because there was this difference in approaches that everybody had been taking.
And who is responsible for developing this test method so that it's a legitimate sort of scientifically robust method? Is that something you're working with universities on, or working with a consortium? How does that work?
Yeah, so I actually represent the Microfibre Consortium, and what we have done is we've come together as an industry representing brands, retailers, suppliers, academics, research partners, and we've been working together, and development of a test method is something that we have had at the core of our work right from the beginning. But we're not standing alone. This work is going on by many different organisations. The CIA, the Cross-Industry Agreement on Microfibers that's representing Europe, has been doing some phenomenal work to bring together around about 10 labs that are working on developing test methods. Their work is pulling in globally all this information to make sure we can get to an aligned method, and we're almost there.
So what do you think? Are we 6 months out, 2 years out?
Oh my gosh, that's really holding me with a gun to my head on
that
one.
No. That wasn't aggressive. So give me a span of time. How long could it take?
We're coming, while I'm sitting here today, we're coming to the end of our validation testing, and what the validation testing will do is kind of make sure that the labs out there can reproduce the test method as we would expect, and therefore if brands are relying on it to make business decisions, we feel confident that that test method is actually working. The alignment which is going on at the same time is making sure that one lab is aligned to the next lab, and therefore when we're testing we're getting very similar results.
Right.
So those two pieces of work are going hand in hand.
And the consortium is doing that work and also sharing knowledge with other actors.
Yes, so TMC have developed in conjunction with the University of Leeds in the UK, who have done this work on the development of the test method for us. They are heavily involved in the cross-industry agreement as well.
So I have a sense that we're still learning a lot. Do we know, or do we have a guess, how different stages of textile manufacturing and the processes impact the release of these things? Do we have a sense where they could be most?
It's interesting because I was having a number of conversations earlier on today while at Planet Textiles, and I think a lot of us people that have been in the textile industry for a little while, and actually maybe longer than a little while, and come from quite informed textile understanding, we have kind of guesstimates and technology-based assumptions that we can assume what's going to happen at different stages. But I think also we have very scientific minds where we know that we can't necessarily make business-informed decisions until we have that true academic research that kind of supports our hypothesis.
Right,
and
so
I think that's the stage that we're
So
at.
speak to me not as the scientist,
Oh,
speak to me as the, no, speak to me as the gut, the experienced textile person who has a gut feeling about where they could come from. We won't hold you to it.
Yeah, so one of the first things we did with the Microfibre Consortium is actually map out all the different processes that are involved in making a textile, from raw material to finished garment. And we started to look at the different areas as to kind of what's involved and where we think a lot of those changes are going to come from. I mean, the obvious one that was talked about from the early stages was fabric finishing, so mechanical finishing where you brush and you crop and you peach, but in some way you're affecting the characteristics of that fibre to make it more luxurious, warmer, whatever it is, but the consumer's requiring something where you're damaging that fibre. So that's an obvious place where there could be impact. I think another area for me is on the construction of the materials. You've got very dense, very tight constructions, you've got looser constructions, you've got different ways that fibres go into materials. You know, some of them are well secured, some of them are less well secured. That's obviously another area. But I think, you know, there's a number of different areas, even if you go further back in the stage, you know, how we produce the yarns, the spinning methods. Are they, you know, loosely spun? Are they more hairy? Are they filament? Are they, you know, when I talk about filament, are they like continuous filament, or are they broken down so they're twisted together to keep their strength? Sorry, I don't know how technical to get here.
No, but that's so those are the kinds of indicators you use to get a sense, could this be a high shedding part of the process or less so?
Yeah.
And is there any one particular type of process that you think this is super likely to be super high shedding? If you were to point at one.
Oh my gosh, I'm just going to tell you what everybody's been pointing their finger at,
okay.
which is finishing.
Finishing.
But I personally believe we need to go further back in the chain.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot more we can do.
And in the finishing, for those of us who are not experts, what happens there that would
well, there's two sorts of finishing. There's one where you can put chemicals on top of a fabric to make it perform, so make it waterproof or make it manage the moisture better. And there's the other one, which is the mechanical way. So that's using mechanical means, I suppose, like brushing it or cutting it or doing something that's modifying it through non-chemical routes. And I think that one has been flagged from the beginning of this topic being an issue as to a contributing factor.
Okay, so if we're thinking about things to be done, you've told us a lot about the way you're all now working globally and within the consortium to validate the methodologies and to do the measurements.
Yes.
But I can imagine that there are broader discussions about how to deal with this at a policy level or commercial level. What are different stakeholders proposing, as you understand it, to address this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the stakeholder part is really interesting because I see quite a diverse conversation going on at different levels, and we talk to everybody basically. I think at the company level I'm seeing quite a variety of approaches. You know, some are very much at the elementary level where they join TMC because they don't have internal resources and they want to be part of a bigger collective group to kind of help make decisions and help move the industry forwards. So for them it's around education, it's around communication. You know, how can they communicate to their consumers, how can they communicate internally.
So these are the textile commercial companies you're talking about?
I'm talking about companies as in brands and retailers. Brands and retailers. Yeah. But then on the other extreme of members that we have, you know, there's internal task teams. There's a huge amount of work going on internally. So there's quite a diversity. But also if you think, you know, the amount of time that we've been going, you know,
when did you launch the consortium?
Well, interesting. We started working as a consortium under the management of the European Outdoor Group in, I think it was 2016. And this came off the back of the crowdfunding I did, Don't Feed the Fish, because we got so much interest that we couldn't actually manage it through the crowdfunding. So EOG jumped in and it was phenomenal to work with them and actually be able to scale it and get the consortium members in. We soon found that, you know, through the complexities of the topic and through the interest from members, that it needed to be a standalone organisation. So we spun it into the Microfibre Consortium, which was...
Is that the only organisation of its kind within textiles?
There's many different working groups, organisations, different formats.
Okay.
I don't think there's actually a company that's dedicated just to microfibers. I hadn't really thought about that before, but yeah, that's interesting. So we are a company operating as a non-profit, and we work on the behalf of our members and funded through membership fees.
Okay.
So it's a very small organisation, but I think what is really refreshing is the kind of the way that everybody kind of wants to work together. I think from a very early stage, everybody realised that you can't fix this if you're one company. You know, it's such an interrelated issue that you have to work as part of the bigger picture.
So have you had any interaction with governments? What do they Is this on their radar? I mean, obviously in the EU, plastics have been on the radar.
Yeah.
There is a lot of action on visible plastics,
Yeah.
single-use plastics, landfill, recycling. What about this type of shedding, this area?
Yeah, very interesting. I think, you know, looking across the spectrum of US, Europe, and then UK, because you know, I'm sitting in the UK, so I get more involved in what's happening there. With regards to government, I think if we start with US, you know, there has been some legislation put forwards. You know, I'm not so familiar with kind of how that's kind of developing going forwards, but in the EU, which is more where we've been involved, again, the cross-industry agreement has been, you know, the reason why the test method has been so important for that cross-industry agreement is because until they get the test method, the policy can't happen.
That's right.
You know, and I think they've taken a really sensible, you know, approach, as in they've done the test method first, they've then going into conversations around the policy, and I think what I'm seeing in the UK perhaps, which is a little bit different, and I have been involved at, you know, speaking down with some of the MPs around this, is they are kind of having a little bit more of a knee-jerk reaction, as in the conversation's going straight to policy rather than what is happening in the industry and how can the textile technology understanding actually inform the policy. I think what we're trying to do there is maybe slow them down a little bit and align them to what's happening in Europe, because I think the European approach has been very sensible, very systematic. But yes, I think governments are interested in it. I think where there isn't alignment is, and I think you're going to ask me about money and things later, but where there isn't alignment is governments are talking about policy, but when they're looking at where they're putting their funding, they're still putting their funding with regards to the big plastics. And I think there's a misalignment there, because if they're going to be putting policy in place, which I think is ultimately where governments are heading, they need to make sure that the funding for the research and the development comes ahead of the policy. So we've got time to action what needs to be actioned ahead of being told how the changes are going to have to happen in our industry.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine it. Right, if you don't understand what the impacts are, you can't make policy. You shouldn't be making policy.
And I'm happy.
Although you could have a precautionary principle, but that is very costly.
And I think also for government is making sure that they're getting the right, accurate data.
Right.
What does scare me sometimes is when they get hold of out-of-date data, and we know that we've got more up-to-date data, but they're asking the wrong people.
Right. So what is the consortium propose? I mean, you're proposing, again, we're back to getting the right data, getting the right measurement, but are there other proposals you're making around addressing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's great about TMC is we started on the test methodology, but since we've spun into its own organisation, we're in a more robust position to get after a clear strategy for the next 3 years. We've put out a work plan, we're calling it our work plan pyramid, that covers 3 areas of work that will cover us over the next 3 years. The integrity part, which is the test method, the policy, that work goes through the core of everything that we do. It's where we started, we will continue with that until we're really comfortable with it. That has been really needed because without that we can't get to the next 2 pieces of work, which are really important for delivering results. So the next 2 pieces of work, the second one around product development, and what I mean about that is with the majority of our members being brands and retailers, their product development teams, their designers, the people that are influencing how products are getting from the design stage to the consumer, they need tools, they need understanding so they can make better informed textile decisions, and that's what we're focusing on next. So now that we have the test methodology, we will be taking an array and a diversity of materials into the lab in a systematic way so we can start to identify where the biggest losses are coming from. We're building a database so we've got that information going in, and it's not just about the test results. The test results are important, but what underlies those test results are the technical information that we get from the manufacturers, so we can see exactly the technical details that have gone into those materials, and from that we can draw conclusions, alignments, and really start to make those statements and those recommendations to the industry. So that's product development.
Right. So your integrity, product development,
there's one more.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the third and final one, which is we're working a little bit later on this one, and actually we've had some meetings here at ITMA around the manufacturing, is a supplier-facing piece of work where we're looking at the facilities level. So, you know, the product development is very much about when the consumer has the product and they wash it, how much fibre is coming out. But the manufacturing piece is more about the hidden loss at the manufacturing level, and quite often that's going to be in countries where we don't have exposure to what's happening. We can't see the environments it's going into, but it's our responsibility to also make sure that we're working with the manufacturers, we're providing them with best practices, we're measuring where we can so we can really understand the impact that's coming from different processing types or different, you know, factory types. Not quite sure where this piece of work is going to go. We know that there is an eagerness to do this work. We have come together as a cross-stakeholder group to start to look at what we need to do, and we're starting to put dates in place as to kind of when we're going to really define and kick off what we need to do. But I think this is going to be quite a complex piece of work if you think about the diversity of materials, diversity of products, and diversity of suppliers.
Is there any one thing that's slowing progress in terms of what's happening? Is there? You did, of course, mention it's all about research money for some of these things, but is there anything?
It's not all about research money. I think there's a few things. There's quite a few things actually, because although we are moving quickly, it feels like we're moving really slowly. I think one thing that really frustrates me, which feels like a roadblock and it doesn't need to be there, is people that keep referring to old data. You know, and I know we don't all have hours and hours in the day to keep up to speed.
But who's referring to it? Is it watchdogs? Is it consumer advocacy? Is it brands?
Media sometimes does a bad job of getting the right pieces of research in when they're talking about it. I think also, I think there's quite a lot of landscaping exercises going on with organisations that want to understand what's happening. And I think sometimes they home in on perhaps the more dramatic figures, where, you know, it's not helpful for us if somebody keeps repeating a dramatic figure. And actually, we spend a lot of time...
Like the figures I mentioned at the beginning.
There's some others out there. You know, we hear all the time about, you know, acrylic being a really bad fibre. And I think if I was to spend less time pacifying people and put that time into where that work is needed, I think we can cut the spin and we can really get on with the work in hand. But that's maybe just a personal bugbear. So there's that. I think also when we started, I think we came into it, and I say we, and I don't think I'm alone in this, but with a certain sense of naivety. You know, we thought, okay, we'll do this and we'll do this, and you know, maybe we'll fix it. I think, and this is also what's exciting about research, there's never a clear answer to anything. So you go in and you get one answer, but maybe it poses another 10 questions. And I think, so that is slowing things up, because we feel that we have to go back and really make sure that the questions it's posing aren't going to derail us later on.
Okay. Is it possible, given that you're going to have a more robust methodology, and the trends have been that your estimates have gotten more optimistic in the positive sense that you've seen maybe less amounts of shedding than initially projected, that you'll come out of this going, the textile industry is not a big contributor, and although it'd be nice to not shed at all, we don't have to spend a lot of our time on this in comparison to other sustainability challenges. Could that be a result of your work? Or you're not anticipating that?
If that is a result, I think we would all be very, very happy. I don't think we would see it as wasted work, because I think what we're doing in this process is we're defining a new way of working. You know, as I said, I've been in the industry a long time. I go back to the days where we would spend a whole day in a material factory doing a pre-production. You know, some organisations don't even know where their materials are coming from, and I think this kind of addresses a much bigger issue. You know, yes, we're talking about microfibers, but I think if it's not microfibers, it's going to be something else. And I think we need to get back to that true science of how we used to put products together. And maybe I'm old-fashioned, maybe we're never going to get to that stage, but I think we have to understand what goes into our materials to fix any of the problems going forwards. We can't just slap a chemistry on it and say job done. Because sometimes that's what we see. We see something new come out, and then we have to test that new thing and see what harm that's going to create. So I think if we can get down to true science, then I would be quite happy. Sorry, I maybe waffled on that answer.
No, not at all. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I think that's a very wise, sounds to me, wise conclusion from whatever happens. And good luck with the speed to get us the robust information we need to take that decision.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much.